Mike with TechPB.com. Real excited about today's episode. We're going to talk about the difference between chopping and barrel break. It's important to know the difference between because in order to properly fix your gun, you need to understand what your gun is actually doing. Chopping is when your eyes and your detents aren't working properly and your bolt is slicing another ball in half. And a barrel break is when the ball just breaks in your barrel. Now, it's important because when people bring me guns for me to fix, here's a scenario number one. They walk up to me, Mike, my gun is chopping. I take a look at their gun, I replace their detents, I replace their eyes, I test it out, the gun's working fine, I hand it to them, they go out, play another game, comes back, yeah, but it's still chopping. I've fixed everything I could possibly think of. I don't understand why it's still chopping. They're actually getting barrel breaks. And some people will say, I keep getting barrel breaks. So I ask them, did you inspect your paint? Are you overboring? Yes, yes. Okay, well, you're not actually barrel breaking. You're actually chopping because your eyes are broken. So you can see where the confusion lies. And I hope that today's episode will teach you a little bit about the difference between chopping and a barrel break. It's very frustrating when this happens to you at the field. And by isolating these two problems should hopefully help you fix your gun faster. Okay, chopping is the most severe problem, and it's also the hardest to fix. Symptoms of it, typically a wet bolt, your paint is in your loader neck and breech. Sometimes your bolt will even stick forward because when it slices the paintball in half, shell gets stuck between the bolt and the body of the gun. Let me explain to you exactly what chopping is. Chopping is when, as your bolt is pushing paintballs out of your gun, it either starts to come forward too fast and it cuts a paintball in half, or sometimes what happens is, because your loader is set too high, that it actually, one ball actually goes forward past the detents, and as your bolt goes forward to shoot that ball, it actually slices the bottom of another ball. So that's chopping. Chopping is when your bolt is slicing your paintball in half. Now, what are some of the some of the reasons that I've seen that guns start chopping paint? Number one problem by far across the board is always the loader speed is too high. I don't understand it. The guns are when you go to a tournament, 15 balls per second is the max. Most fields are about 15 balls per second. Now they got the new rule, it's down to 13 balls per second, but loader speed is too high. I see reloaders, probably one of my favorite loaders, but I see people, they put their loader as high as it possibly can go on the setting. They're trying to feed balls at 40 balls a second when their gun is only shooting at 15. Makes no sense at all. What happens is the loader puts so much stress on the ball stack that it's actually pushing balls past the detent. So what ends up happening is as you're shooting, one ball slips a little bit past the detent, the other one goes halfway into the breech, bolt goes forward, slices it in half. Or sometimes it puts so much stress on the balls that it actually compacts them and breaks them before it even gets down into your gun. I mean, paintballs are very brittle. So the most important thing to do is make sure that your loader speed is too high. You want to have your loader set on the minimum speed that it required to shoot 15 balls per second. If your reloader hits a consistent 15 balls per second on setting 1, leave it at setting 1. There's no need to go to setting 2 or even setting 3. Setting 3 is the gun turns into a blender. Velocities, typically setting only needs to be on 3 or 4. V35, the victory boards, maybe setting 2 or 3. Check it out. Set it on the lowest setting possible in order to shoot your 15 or 13 balls per second. Another thing I've seen, a lot of people will be at their house dry firing their gun. They'll be at home dry firing their gun, making sure their guns will work, but they'll forget to turn their eyes back on. So their eyes are off or it's in simulate. Another problem that causes ball chop, the ball detents are worn. Always check your ball detents. I know the Intimidator ball detents maybe last 10 cases tops. Some of the other guns may last a little bit longer, but always check your detents, especially with the Delrin detents. A little bit of dirt can get in there and cause the detent to stick back. So make sure that you check your detents, make sure they're springing forward. Something else too is on the board settings. I know the Intimidators have a ball in place setting. Other guns have ball in place settings. Make sure that it's not set on 0. It's not going to make your gun shoot any faster. It's capped at 13 balls per second anyway. So give the ball a little bit of chance to properly seat into the breech before the bolt goes forward. So you don't need to have your ball in place at 0. Give it a millisecond or two for it to seat into place before the bolt goes forward, shoots it out the gun. Double feeding, we've already covered that, big problem. Another thing too, bolt placement. Sometimes a lot of guns nowadays, especially like the Egos, Intimidators, even the Marks, some of the other guns, they have the ability to adjust your bolt placement. Sometimes the ball may not be rolling forward. Sometimes the ball may be rolling back. Most paintball guns, when you're shooting, you've got your gun tilted up at an angle to arc the ball across the field. So if your bolt isn't in the proper position to where when the ball drops, it's perfectly in front of it, sometimes the ball can roll backwards, which means that the next paintball may start to come down into the breech, and as your bolt goes forward, it'll push this one out and then clip the bottom of the next paintball. So that's something else to inspect. Obviously, ball chop, eyes are broken, they can be misaligned, or sometimes it can be a board issue. Sometimes some boards, the software, or just, board may have an issue with it to where as you're shooting, it may just burp out an extra shot. So obviously, chopping is indeed the most severe problem. Chopping generally means there's an issue with the gun itself. Generally, it centralizes around the breech area. Detents, eyes, bolt placement, or loader, which is obviously the most common culprit that I see is the loader. People spend $1,200 on guns, $100 on a loader, and then they set the loader up on, especially reloaders, the biggest culprits of them all, setting 3, and the gun becomes a blender and they don't understand why. So now let's talk about barrel breaks. Barrel breaks are when, as the ball is traveling down the barrel, it breaks, or the ball comes apart. The biggest thing to do with barrel breaks is to check to make sure your bolt is clean, the eyes are clean. You want to make sure everything is absolutely spotless. If there's even so much as a drop of paint on the inside of your barrel or any sort of oil, it can cause the ball, as it's going out the barrel, to catch the wall, start bouncing back and forth, and come apart before it makes it out the end. Something I'm going to cover in another episode. It's very important to overbore. You want to make sure that when you put your paintball in, that it rolls all the way through your barrel. Overboring is probably the best thing you can do to prevent barrel breaks. Especially now that we're in the winter time, or if you get extremely brittle paint, if all it takes for your paint to break is if you drop it 3 feet off your bench and it breaks, you may want to turn down your velocity on your gun 260 feet per second or even less. You don't need to be shooting brittle paint at 300 feet per second. If it breaks on anything, it's going to break at 260 feet per second. Something else too, obviously, always check your paint. If it's oblong, brittle, cold, oily, or wet, you're going to have issues with your paint. You're going to have barrel breaks. Clean your barrel breaks. Something else I see people do too, they accidentally shoot their barrel sock, but they never clean out the residue that's at the end here. That's going to cause barrel breaks, and as you're shooting, the mess is going to work its way up your barrel. So hopefully that will help you diagnose the problem a little bit easier. Here at TechPB, we want to help you with your guns, but if you're telling me your gun is chopping and I tell you to replace your eyes and your gun is still chopping, it could be your detents, it could be your bolt placement, or you're telling me you're getting barrel breaks and your eyes are broken. It's very important to understand what your gun is actually doing in order to properly diagnose the problem. Email me if you have any questions. Thank you very much.